final with a very beautiful panel. So I'll give like later on for them to introduce themselves. Standard BP rules apply, 7 minutes speaking time. And yeah, let's have a beautiful round. Congratulations to everyone who made it this far. May the adjudicators, the panel, introduce themselves shortly.
Hey everyone, my name is Zukisani and I'll be the panelist. Congratulations for making it this far and good luck for the round.
Hi everyone, my name is Ngosi. Congratulations for making the grand finals and all the best.
My name is Clive Mbudaya. I'm one of the panelists for this round. Congratulations for reaching finals and all the best to all teams.
Hi, I'm Seneliso. I'm going to be a panelist. Good luck to all of you guys.
Hi guys, Mary here. We both the panelists and good luck for all of you guys.
Hi everyone, I'm Chembe. Good luck.
Okay, thank you very much. So please indicate how you're going to take your POIs verbally or through the text space. There's going to be a timer on the text space as well. And without taking any more time, now call upon the Prime Minister to come and give us the first speech of this thing. Here.
Okay, can someone just confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, great. So, yeah, my name is Rean. I would just like to take POIs probably at my 50th minute. You would just probably unmute and say POI. I will take you then anyways. I'll just like also the clarity in my 2nd minute, just so if there exists any. Here, thanks Rahim. I hope this fine is worth it. Anyways, so with that out of the way, just give me a few seconds. Let me get these together and then we could start. Okay, beautiful. As well, in case I break, just as well indicate on the chat or probably and I'll be able to respond. Okay, cool. So all right, I'm gonna start this speech. Okay, just like tracking whether there is a time on the chart. As soon as that is confirmed, I'll just like start anyway. Can someone just like drop a time on the chat space, text space rather? Check. Beautiful. Thank you again. Okay, cool then. I guess I can see the timer now. All right. So I'm going to start this speech in 3, 2, 1. I think it's very crucial within this debate to understand in which specific world you get to prefer any specific alternative. We don't necessarily think it's a burden on opening government to prove that actually everyone is going to be virtuous anyways. That's not a burden. I think what we just like have to prove is why in a world where presumably everyone is pious or most likely atheist on the flip end, that is a world that's more sustainable. It's a world that gives you like significantly much benefits. I think the metric on which we get to prefer something is quite more simple. If it's able to eliminate specific harm that exists within structures, but secondly, if there is like some level of self-correcting mechanism that exists from preferring that specific world, that is to say, there have been like historical injustices within that specific extent, but then you're able to shift those specific injustices and have like a betterment of those specific societal structures in and of itself. I think that becomes like a crucial metric on which you prefer that specific world. But secondly, I think the reason why the other world would most likely not be preferable is if it's able to perpetuate specific harm that most likely doesn't have self-correcting mechanism. But in most cases, even if you likely do like correct those specific harm, we say significantly you take a significant amount of time to correct those specific injustices anyways. And I think it kind of like matters how that ultimately happens. There are three things that will have the take on opening government. One, to show why ultimately atheism is at the root of worsening things like political, secondly, economic, but also social structures within that specific sort of realm. If we most probably show to you that this world becomes less incorruptible, or most likely necessarily is an evaluation of things like, say for instance, viruses, which most likely builds better structures, who win this specific debate on opening government. There are two things here in terms of the context. Notice, we think a lot of people in whatever like sort of world they live in assign specific states or jurisdictions they live in over things like randomization. That means is that you don't get like to choose where you most significantly are born. Ultimately, what that means is twofold. One is that a lot of people necessarily have significant resources that other individuals don't get to benefit on, right? What that essentially means is that there is like an incentive and a push world to kind of like become a better place in which there is like some imminent resource allocation for things to be redistributed across all, say for instance, demographics that get to exist anyways. But secondly, I think if the normative principles to argue for things like global citizenship, which most likely becomes the trend within like current circumstances, we say it becomes more plausible anyways. At a point in time that the world or the chart within like current trends is likely around, say for instance, is likely around things like helping the most neediest ultimately, or to kind of like make out things around like sympathy and empathy and bits of. I think it becomes like largely very crucial to kind of like deviate more closely to that specific world. But two things then we shall argue on our side of the house. Notice, things like externalities are much more likely bound to happen anyways, right? That is to say, specific things that are outside people's control are most likely going to happen anyways. The problem in status quo is that at a point in time that these particular things ultimately get to happen, there is an ability of things like self-culpability, where individuals most likely feel that they are responsible for the specific bad impacts that happen onto themselves anyways. Opening opposition cannot argue the ideas of, oh, individuals might have the ability to explore and move out of that specific bubble ultimately by challenging these specific structures. I think first off, these particular things are less likely going to change for the vast majority of individuals. The problem with that specific world is that you have a trend towards antagonism, or not necessarily invest in incentives around jeopardizing specific efforts by other specific entities. You have individuals moving out within those specific sort of structures and ultimately questioning government to the extent that they do not like really care about the specific impacts and the particular harm that is much more likely meted by the actions that are most likely doing and bit of. What we don't necessarily agree is that there is a high possibility then for these specific things not most likely kind of change in themselves. There are two things that exist within our world in and of itself, right? I think one, there is an innate celebration of things like ethical codes. What that necessarily means that it's much more likely taken in the reflection of things like daily life or decision making that individuals are most likely necessarily taken. The emphasis on our side of the house is much more likely centered around things like character development, because in our world, you agree that things are less likely going to change. What you most likely necessarily invest your resources into is much more likely around things like spiritual growth, or how ultimately you're able to maneuver through these existing circumstances, the kind of adaptability sort of like caught in and of itself. What you most likely do on our side of the house is you indoctrinate people towards towards necessarily a strong sense of things like community or things like shared values. You don't get that ability for individuals to have that push or remorse towards necessarily benefiting other individuals at a point in time that other specific things are much more likely held dear. A few tenets that you throw away on that flip end. One, the ability of things like passion and compassion, which are much more likely ingrained. Notice, on our side, when you kind of like necessarily populate this message as the way it is, at a point in time that you necessarily get through things like quandaries or specific uncertainties about things like life, you most likely have individuals necessarily supporting the way up to specific causes. The reason why you have, say for instance, specific stakeholders necessarily supporting people who are going like through things like war or things of the like is because they probably think things like war are most likely imminent. There's like a high propensity for these particular things to most likely happen to them in the bit of. These particular moral disciplines are much more likely glued within our world, where you most likely necessarily have cautious religious individuals existing within that realm. On the flip end, the comparative becomes more simple. You're vesting specific energy around things like materialism. do not believe in concepts like the afterlife. We say again, the only disincentive for individuals necessarily explore such harmful actions they most likely would take anyways is because they most likely think that they kind of violate what the divine scriptures are most likely preaching about, which necessarily keeps the specific individuals necessarily in tandem. The comparative becomes simple. These individuals now no longer believe in such a concept, which most likely means that they could do anything to the extreme of amassing things like wealth. We say that wealth becomes unfair. Why? Because it's most likely built off the subjugation of others. You don't care about how other specific individuals necessarily kind of like feel like. The kind of like power dynamics you kind of worsen on the flip end is that the coercive power for those who are already within such structures are much more likely going to escalate on that flip end. You have a power balance where you have this specific structure where you have a cautiously religious sort of society necessarily existing in a virtual. The comparative and the way up becomes more simple. In which world you get like sustainable existence of all these individuals in terms of things like coexistence ultimately? I think that's much more better on government end because we argue for that virtuous system where individuals necessarily look at like public sort of like society beyond things like self and individual. So we think that like necessarily becomes like practically very important. But secondly, I think there's like an innate ability for you to allow a coexistence of individuals from like religious background. So opening a position cannot argue that, oh, the world has become more fluid, so there's like some like deviation towards like appreciating other individuals. We say that two things can necessarily coexist because you most likely have an acceptance and respect for other belief systems or other practices. You throw away all these autonomous things that give individuals some form of identity, which most likely becomes like full because it forms the core of things like shared beliefs, the continuity of these structures we brought out in open in government.
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech. We now call upon the leader of opposition to come and start their case. Here.
Thank you so much for having us here. Before I begin my speech, I would like to thank everyone, my teammate Kuda, for getting us this far. We didn't think we'd get to the open finals, but we're here, so thank God. With that respect, all the best to everyone's speech. I'll begin. Firstly, my name is Kamanga. I'll take my POIs audibly, and I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Religion as a whole is something that has been so significant in a long time, to the point in which it's been the thing that has been the driving force of what people believe is right. We feel that this is a problem to the extent in which religion has led to a variety of different problems, to the point in which people continue on to conduct things in the name of Christianity, in the name of being a Muslim. Significantly, you see within society that people continuously do harmful things to themselves, where they fail to actually recognize that they're supposed to get their children immunized, but due to their belief systems, they're not willing to have it within their society. Or in certain instances, when you see different nations have these political tensions simply because of religion, that is significantly the main thing that occurs within society, where religion remains the driving force for division and disunity, as well as lacking any real care and compassion for people. That is the world that they prefer on their side of government, and thus we're so honored to oppose, and we believe you would do the same. Within the significant speech, there are 3 things you're going to expect. Firstly, I'm going to give you rebuttal. Secondly, I'm going to give you characterization that was really needed for this debate. Thirdly, I'm going to give you argumentation that justifies your stance, and onto the rebuttal. Now, a variety of different points are set up. They say that in order for them to prove that their world is significantly better, they have to show why people are more likely to buy in as religious people instead of atheists. We significantly say that we already win this simply under the grounds of the significant work that religious people have to do, like how the Pope has to go into school for 16 years, simply just to lead a couple of people who might not even subscribe to the religion. Or significantly, how the variety of different traditional belief systems in which you have to go through certain trials. So we feel as though that is very tragic. The buy-in there is that the fact is, people would be more likely to become atheists to the point in which they don't have to go through this laborious work simply to like worship someone who's not possibly there. Entities, of course, might not exist, but even if they did, we find that it's significantly problematic for you to have this as your own line, as your way to win this debate, because there's a variety of different points in our argumentation that justifies why atheism is better than your religious. Onto the points of where they say that this debate is not about. They speak about how in itself they have better societal change. They speak about no corruption in their world. We're going to disprove all these arguments quite easily within our argumentation. Then they say that at the end of the day, morals aren't maintained on our side of the house. Simply because you don't have religion doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to have morals. Panel, keep a note that the government institutes a law system to ensure that you as a person can actually see what is morally correct and essentially be able to actually avoid those harmful things. But even if that's not even existent, we still see within society that there is some form of real connection about certain principles, such as like you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't do these bad things, you should show compassion towards your friends, you should be forgiving to other people. That is essentially perpetuated within society, not simply based on what religion is, but based on what human understandings about. Humans essentially show these emotions to the benefit of themselves, to ensure that people can actually have a meaningful world at the end of the day. And so it is unnecessary for them to say that if you don't have this religion, you remove these people's identity. Keep in note, panel, that your identity is not formulated on a religion. On those grounds, they are just advocating for a world in which people identify themselves as Christians simply for the fun of it. We are advocating for a world that you identify yourself as yourself. I identify myself as Bere Kamanga, not as a Christian. Significantly, when you have this identification, you don't necessarily have to continuously be identifying yourself as to some other religion that isn't really significant at the end of the day. That is something that we feel is much more particularly important with this debate. Moving on to the necessary pieces of characterization that was left on the side of the house rejected. Firstly, we ought to find out which world are we supposed to prefer. We prefer a world in which there's more liberalism, where people can actually talk about their opinions more freely, and there is no real dynamic that actually stop you from actually talking about what you want to talk about. 2, we prefer more inclusivity despite who you are, despite of what you actually believe in. And 3, we want to advocate for a world in which people do not put themselves in mortal danger because of their religious beliefs. Like the Mapo story in Zimbabwe, where they simply do not allow their children to get immunized simply for the fact that it's against their religious belief systems. We feel as though you're endangering your child simply because of religious belief systems that might not even make sense, or significantly to an entity who might not even exist. That's something very harmful on their side of the house, and this proves the point why people would be more likely to become those religious people at the end of the day, because it's very dangerous to your own children. 4, we're going to show you why there's better international relations on our side, and how nations do not go to war simply because of religious belief systems. Now onto my lines of argumentation. The first point is more inclusivity within the world. Inclusivity as a whole does not exist within society under the notion that people within society do not. Sorry?
Time is time out. Okay, thank you, speaker, for that wonderful speech. You are reminded that the speeches are 7 minutes, 15 seconds, and we won't be recording anything after that mark. Without taking any more time, we now call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to come and extend on their case. Here.
Okay, am I audible? Sorry, Chair, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, cool. I'm keeping a timer in the chat space. I will as well wait for POIs from the chat space. Please don't budge. I don't trust my network might just go off. I'll request for 1. So even if you don't put it in chat, I'll be able to request for 1. Shout out to Rpda for this initiative, and shout out to the wonderful teams you have met in the tournament. Shout out to the foster kids, and I think now that's all. Yeah, and shout out to Rean, obviously. I'll start my speech in 1, 2, 3, go. Our case is not going to say that certain things won't exist. We are just going to show how they are devalued because of a larger construct that considers materialism as something more significant than the innate goodness of human beings. The first argumentation you get from these guys is to say that, oh, there will be more liberalism. Why is liberalism?
Sorry. So there seems like there was a glitch in the timer for the previous speaker. The speech ended at 4 minutes 30 seconds, meaning they have 3 minutes 30 seconds. There was a glitch in the timing system on Discord. So yeah, leader of opposition can finish up their speech. They have 3 minutes 15 seconds, right?
I think I started my speech quite earlier. I thought it was 15, 17 seconds.
Okay, so you're just going to add 3 minutes.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. So, on to my lines of argumentation. I'll continue my speech in 3, 2, 1. There lies more inclusivity within our world to the extent in which people can now actually have some form of like actual acceptance within the world. We feel that doesn't exist on their side of the house due to what status quo essentially looks like. If you look at the nation of Uganda as a whole, significantly, a lot of policies implemented by its own government that goes against LGBTQ people simply based on how they live their lives. Their sense of morality essentially states that you as a person are not deemed valuable within that particular country. Panel, I ask the question, how do you stand for such a side that fails to cater for your needs? There's no inclusivity in such a world in which conservatism essentially is the main breadwinner of the entirety of the world. We feel so it's insignificant to marginalize these minorities to the extent in which they cannot even be people with these worlds. It means that you continue on to ostracize them and not actually value them and continue on these minority groups trying to fight for some form of liberal change. That is the significant part in which society operates, not at the time, how there's actually better, how in itself there's more power dynamics being abused on their side of the house. Panel, we want to note that significantly within status quo, you clearly see how these people, these popes, these priests, often take their long time doing what is particularly important. Panel, we want to note that this debate is about doing the necessary work as being a Christian, a Muslim, or whatever religion you are in. It means that you take this time to actually try to represent people. Why is this significantly important? It means that you're going to misuse your time and energy, and when you get some form of like influence, right, you could possibly mislead these people and take advantage of them. We feel so that is something entirely that we ought to regret. We as an opposition advocate for a world in which liberalism and a freedom of speech and a freedom of being yourself and having an identity is valued. We are the side opposition, and we've never been so honored to oppose.
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech. We'll now call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to come and extend on their case. Here.
All right, so I think I should be getting an external timer if you don't mind, and I'll just be using that in case. Okay, am I audible still? All right, cool. If my network breaks at any moment, please tell me. Again, I'll be taking POIs from the chat space. Kindly don't budge, I don't trust my network. And I'll start my speech in 1, 2, 3, go. So the way human beings make decisions is by them thinking of what is more of a priority to them. There are two contrasting things in this debate. In the world where you believe that everyone is religiously pious, it significantly means that they want to consider ethical considerations more, ethical codes. They want to do these religious things more. They want to be morally righteous and things of the like while making decisions. In the world of atheism, characterization you don't get from opposition is the idea of materialism, that your life and what it amounts to, your entire existence, is contributed to and is calculated by how much material gain that you significantly have. The most important thing in that world is how much wealth you have, how much material you have amassed within that specific regard. Yeah, there's a problem here, because however much you want to consider this as the priority in your life, there is scarcity and finite amount of resources. It means fundamentally there's a limitation to access to how many people are going to be satisfied. Which is important because the world you ought to choose is the world in which there's more accessibility to fulfillment and happiness within your own life. Let's do the comparative and not leave it hanging. In our world, you only need to freaking pray. You only need to be righteous. You only need to be kind. You only need to be compassionate to feel some kind of fulfillment and happiness in the world. You need to drive into Rover. You don't need to drive to have huge amounts of money that never actually amount to something that you could consider as finite enough for you. Yes, please.
Children not get
Please, I say don't badger. My timer at around 5:33. Please, I say don't badger, because yuck. Please don't badger. Put your POI request in the chat space, because every time I hear someone disrupting, I be thinking it's Chair telling me my network is shitty. Please. So I'll resume in 1, 2, 3. I don't even know where I stopped. Okay. Fulfillment and happiness. Okay, I'll resume in 1, 2, 3, go. Chair, look at the infinite sort of access to what makes people happy in our world. You just need to pray. You just need within that specific world in order for you to consider yourself as something that is going to be fulfilled. Notice, Chair, we don't necessarily say that you won't get material like kind of benefits in our world, because human beings are going to work anyway. The question is, where do you get more closure with the belief of divine intervention? On our side of the house, as Rean explains, you still have multiple of external factors that get to limit people's self-actualization. On our side of the house, you have a bit of closure and comfort, knowing that this is God's plan and there is something that is definitely better for you within the other world rather than this world. The question then becomes in the debate, what do people do in terms of an atheist world if those external factors are limiting them? They're going to go to morally convenient ways. This is why we say it is, even if we are to assume that legal structures exist, criminal justice system exists, in that world, it is more, it's more justified for you to be morally lenient, because the overall acceptance for you is on how much more material wealth you have. That is why you believe that you should go through all immoral attributes and ways in order for you to amass as much wealth as possible. No one is going to disconsider you so long as you have that finite amount of money anyways. On our side of the house, the people that are credited, the people that are glorified, are people who continuously contribute to their virtue, the people who emulate all these good virtues and probably culture within this specific regard. We said that that is more important, because not only does it have access, it literally has closure for when those external factors cannot then be like sort of eradicated. The means through which these people go to try and break down those factors are violence, are breaking other people and probably stealing from them and things of the like. They are morally inconvenient ways to probably degrade other people's lives in order to like significantly shape what they want and things of the like. Chair, notice how this becomes more important in the debate, because by the framing on how finite amount of resources, it necessarily means that in order for you to graduate within that world and probably have better resources or be considered as a more important person with more important material, your actualization is built on creating scarcity for others. It means you literally don't care that kids in Africa are going to suffer and you don't want to contribute to the budget, because your decision calculus says how much more wealth am I able to amass by myself, rather than contributing to other causes that don't directly have like any sort of importance that usually reflect virtues. We say on our side of the house, you're less likely going to consider that trade-off with your own material to contribute to society, because it doesn't make you better. Okay, POI checked in. 1,
Hello. Yes. Sorry. Are you willing to value compassion over having children actually getting the necessary medicine and immunization? Please engage, speaker.
Exactly. This is the idea. If we are to consider that political structures are going to exist in both worlds, ours are built on how people in those structures think it is more virtuous for them to be less corrupt. It is more virtuous for them to contribute to more humanitarian causes than building weapons that less likely have any sort of virtue attached to them. So we think on our side of the house, because the people in the structures emulate religious virtues that are probably more compassionate, that are probably more contributing to their society, they're more likely going to make decisions that best favor those individuals. The goal on your side is to build as much material wealth as possible, not to use it for society, but to constantly be attached to you, because that is how you explain your existence. You have fully maximized the universe by using it in every way possible to attach it to your soul. That is why less likely you're going to throw all that specific material wealth. On our side of the house, this is the idea. This is just defeating the idea of liberalism they talk about. The idea of liberalism comes from human beings having intrinsic value. That is what happens in religion, that you have a soul. There is that defined dignity that comes from a higher God that has created you, and that is how you need to be valued by a human. That is why we also believe that to some extent, humans ought to be appreciated. The encompassing belief also continues to things like the environment. It is important because it was created by God and things of the like. On their side of the house, they can degrade humans. They can degrade the environment in of itself, so long as the end goal of that is to amass material wealth, because that is the only means of actualization that becomes more important in their decision calculus. So it is okay to degrade human beings. It is okay to discriminate and things of the like, so long as the end point of that is that we are going to have as much wealth as possible, because that is the materialistic world, and that is how atheism values things within this specific world. It explains the world we exist in as something that is materialistic in nature, and we ought to maximize it before we die. Chair, notice the reward system that exists on our side. We say that these individuals are not only rewarded in this world, but also in the hereafter. It means there is some sort of indebtedness for them to the society they exist in, because they want to still do more good within this world before they die, so that they can actually get a better world in the hereafter. Swear by the Quran, and that is how you shape the kind of that is how you significantly shape the kind of trust that exists in this world. There is less trust in that world because every idea from them is everyone is out to get as much material wealth as possible. What happens on our side, there is more trust within society, and that is how we get better inclusion, but also integration of systems, because of how people significantly trust each other through belief systems. Here.
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech. We'll now call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to come and extend on their case. Here.
Just to confirm audibility.
Audible.
All right. I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I want us all to acknowledge and set things straight that in my introduction, I'm going to say to you that we are debating about removing religion. We're not debating about removing emotions. Their whole rant about how we will have people who lack empathy is something that is not inherently true. Where's our evidence and where's our proof? Well, it is in the fact that I don't think many of us here have learned how to laugh from church. Emotions are still going to be in people regardless of whether you're a religious person or not. This is how we have philanthropists like Mr. Beast, not inherently buying into religion, but still they donate money and they give a lot back into the world. We don't necessarily see generous people evaporating into thin air. We don't necessarily think that charities will completely disappear on our side. We still think that emotions are on our side. Nextly, what do we want to go on to? There are claims that we will have a materialistic world where everyone is either survive or die, is something that is completely bogus. We cannot inherently value this. Why? Because number one, materialism is something as a byproduct of capitalism. We don't necessarily see how this gets into our debate. Whether you're religious or not, people are still going to have this materialistic view. The reason why your mother and father go to work every day is because they inherently want more money in order to survive. We don't necessarily see see religious people not inherently abandoning their materialistic standards. If this were the case, then we'd actually have Christians actually just leaving the whole room and going somewhere else and just singing in the forest. We don't necessarily see this in our society. Whether you're religious or not, you still follow the materialistic view of capitalism. This is not something that is part of the debate. So that side proposition has been going on about the wrong thing. Nextly, what do I want to go on to? I want to go on to the fact that they say that their world has less weapons and people thinking about the greater good. What do we want to say? We want to say two things. Two places, Saudi Arabia and Iran. We don't necessarily believe that these two places are inherently being all buddy-buddy. They're not inherently friends. They're not really hugging each other. They're in a war and they are building terror and they're making terrorist groups to actually fight in cold wars. Why? Because this is from the religious tension on who has more power over the Islamic places and the Islamic views. So we don't necessarily see a world where they have less weapons on their side. We actually come here to contradict that and say that we have wars and current status quo that are caused by religion and from the roots of religion. Nextly, what do we want to go on to? We want to go on to the fact that we still have morals on our side, even if they argue that religion is your source of morals. We don't necessarily believe this is true. Why? Because moral starts from your family, it starts from your home. We don't necessarily believe that you learn certain things or anything from church. You don't learn all your morals or all your honesty, your generosity from church. This is how we have people who are unbearable to deal with still going to church. You have to wonder to yourself, how exactly is someone so trouble going to church? Well, this is because morals are raised from your mother and father. We don't necessarily believe that religion plays as fundamental as a role as you say it out to be. Nextly, what we want to characterize our world as. We want to characterize our world as a world with more unity. Taken.
So are you claiming that without religion, there wouldn't be any international conflict within how countries relate with each other?
Now, I've already framed out the whole inter-country conflicts, right? Because of what capitalism. We are not debating about capitalism, but what I included was a war caused by religion. I'm not saying that Russia and USA would immediately be all buddy-buddy because of religion, right? We're not saying that. We're saying that by removing religion, we would effectively decrease the amount of wars. I never claimed that we would eradicate all wars. That is a form of capitalism. If you want to make a capitalist debate, then go somewhere else. Nextly, what do I want to go on to? I want to go on to the fact that our world has more unity. What unity do I speak of? I speak of the fact that generally some religions don't cater for minorities or for the whole society. What do I mean by this? I mean by the fact that we have misogynistic views in religion, and we don't necessarily have views that cater for the LGBTQ in religion. So we have more acceptance of society, of everyone in society as a whole. So our side, on the other hand, has less wars. Taken.
Religion doesn't mean just Christianity and Islam and things of that. Like our religion is also stemming from cultures where you make ethical codes in consideration that there should be moral accountability. You have to explain how atheism contributes to moral accountability, given it doesn't have that kind of setting.
Okay. Now, for your pure eye, it's a bit confusing. You come here to make the connection of religious to cultures, right? But necessarily what we believe is that cultures die down in time. We don't necessarily vie for a world where we have certain cultures such as ATR going into things like you would rather go to a bush doctor and get several thousand needles and share those needles, and then you get HIV and AIDS. That's that. So basically, what do we want to go on to? We want to go on to the fact and clearly state that this debate is not about capitalism. We don't want to see that views in those views in this debate. Nextly, what do we want to say? We want to say that on our side of the house, we actually have less religious extremism and less radical religious acts, right? Imagine a world where 9/11 never happened and a world where the Twin Towers are actually still there. We would have a better world. We don't have cold wars between Saudi Arabia and Iran anymore because these countries are necessarily fighting over petty things such as who owns Mecca or who has dominance over the religion of Islam. Next, what do I want to go on to? With with this, we actually say that there are better international relations. I'm not saying we'll cure all international relations. I'm saying that we will mend some existing ones, such as the ones between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I will state this again. So basically, these two countries have been in war because of religion. If we effectively remove religion, then we offer room for negotiations and we offer room for progression. We don't necessarily see a world where this happens inside government's world. Inside government's world is a world which is more or less chaotic. We don't necessarily vie for a world where society is already divided at the start. A world where you can't necessarily be gay or be yourself, or even being female is something that is looked down upon. A misogynistic world if religion were truly in dominance, right? Submit to your wife. That is what may your wife submit to you. That is what the Bible teaches. We don't necessarily vie for a world where even in Islam, a man is allowed to marry up to 4 wives, but a woman can't have multiple men to marry, right? We see that there are biases in religion that we can't necessarily go for, but we don't think that generosity would disappear out of thin air. We vote for our side as our side is the best case scenario for the whole world, and thus we have less detriments on our side. And with that, I believe that this case is closed inside government's coffin.
Thank you, Speaker, for that iron speech. We'll now move on to the closing of the debate, and we'll call upon the member of government to come and extend here. Yes, Speaker, you're audible.
Okay, so I'll be taking my POIs verbally, but please do not badger me if I don't say anything that I don't take you. And I'd just like to say a huge thanks to my partner who's been with me throughout the tournament, even when I was running bad cases. I'd like to say thank you to all of the coaches who have been helping me throughout the year. And without further ado, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we tell you that the very essence in which humanity was able to build, to be built, and humanity was able to strive, humanity was able to succeed, was identity. And we tell you that religion is one of the greatest parts of identity. We tell you a world without religion is a world where there is less identity and a world which is more divisive. And for that, we are proud to propose this world. We are proud to propose a world where we have more religion. Just quite a few things before I get into the majority of my extension, but just to flag it here. What I'm going to talk to you about in my speech becomes threefold. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about the power of identity in forming community. Second, I'm going to talk to you about the power of religion in IR. Then third, I'm going to talk to you about the power of religion in order, and why I particularly think on the comparative. All of these three things are going to be substantially better on crop than op. But two key things that I have to talk about before I get into my substantive matter. Firstly, just on like a large idea that we get from the opening half about how religion is very exclusionary, how religion is going to cause for individuals to like be forced to not want to be gay, etc., etc., etc. Then this argument became very uncomparative, one. But two, we think that this was a very missing characterization that like it's very unrealistic what's being brought up in the opening half. Let's just clarify what religion actually looks like. We think that yes, religion does look like Islam and does look like Christianity, but we don't particularly individuals who particularly don't buy into like the conservative sentiments are going to be forced to buy into these sentiments. Why progressive Christianity can still not exist outside of the house. And this was trying to tell us that like people who are progressive and who are people who are Christians and don't believe that individuals who are gay are wrong is something which is like not pious, which in the thought would be a very concerning thing for them to say. So we think outside of the house, conservative religion will still exist, so will progressive religion. We particularly that was like a very weak contention from this side of the house. But secondly, within there's still a large amount of truth in religion. You can support African traditional religion. There are religions in Somalia, or there are religions where individuals individuals can be recognized as two-spirit, transgender. There's also religions in which individuals, there are religions in which the gods themselves are gay. This is Greek mythology. We again don't particularly understand why individuals can't just buy into those religions as opposed to religions who don't particularly value their own life goals. But fine, even if we buy into all that characterization, we're still winning about that contention because we still think that individuals are able to sacrifice certain parts of their identity if they mean that they're able to access a greater community and they're going to be able to access all of the benefits of religion as opposed to the still people that they create in a world with no religion. Before I move on, I'll take your point.
Speaker, will you continue on to seeing status quo where people are continuously marginalized because of them being LGBTQ? Why continue lie to the entirety of the panel, saying that your side doesn't essentially have that on your side of the house? Please engage.
Panel, we never told you that people won't won't be conservative, but we also tell you that people will be progressive, just like status quo. Within that, your argument was very uncomparative when you just assume that the removal of atheism or the removal of religion is going to make everybody all hunky-dory and people are going to love each other. Why is this something which is not true, panel? This was linked to my extension. We particularly think that there's a huge power in identity and there's a greater power in shared identity. We particularly think that in our world, in a world where every individual is religious, as well as much as individuals won't be the same, a majority of individuals will be able to relate. Two individuals who are Christian can relate to each other. Two individuals who follow Greek mythology are able to relate to each other, and that shared idea that they follow the same gods and they follow the same principles. What then becomes the comparative there? We thought that in a world with no religion, we thought that there's a great part of that is able to transcend through other physical barriers.
Your eyes.
That we tell you that what is not able to happen on this house, that individuals who are black and white, there's not going to be any way to bridge that gap between them. They're going to be much more divisive. Particularly, it's going to be much more difficult for them to form communities and them to be able to relate to each other when there's no thing that is bringing them together. On the comparative, individuals are able to be brought together through religion, and they're going to be able to have that level of cohesion that is caused by religion. Particularly, there's going to be a lot less cohesion within society when individuals when there's no factor of religion to bring people together. On the comparative, people will be no form of religion. When individuals become much more divisive, they'll be much more divisive on things such as gender, such as skin, such as sexual orientation, because those are the only things you can see. Then that becomes much more problematic on this side of the house. But secondly, panel, just to squash this contention about the power of religion in IR, we particularly think that what we get from Rpda, it became particularly weak became progressively weak throughout the debate when they aren't able to prove that religion is going to not have any form of they aren't able to prove that there's a concrete link between religion and war. They said Saudi Arabia and Iran are in war because they have religious tensions between them, but they don't particularly tell us talk to us about the comparative. You're already getting OJ it's comparative, like individuals are capitalists, so they want to bomb each other. But let's be a bit more realistic there. We think what is much more likely to happen is because these individuals started at that level of religion, they don't have that level of moral compass too. But within the individuals have no real incentive to relate to countries and to relate on an international scale to countries who do not have any level of capital, will not have that level of we don't have that level of incentive for you to relate to them. This looks like particularly in status quo. The only reason why countries associate with China, even though it's a very non-religious state, is because from the comparative, in the world in which countries aren't able to have shared values based on the idea that these two countries there'll be less of an incentive to help out weaker countries and help out countries which are still emerging, because you then lose that incentive, you then lose that capital incentive, you then lose that incentive that you get from that shared relationship. So we particularly think that the power of religion and national religion is to bring countries together regardless of wealth and regardless of status. We think that can't happen instead of us, and we think that weaker countries get left behind in the world where they aren't able to form relationships based on religion. They aren't able to form relationships based on shared sense of community. The only thing that becomes valuable in this side of us in terms of countries becomes that idea of capital, which means that there's going to be a large divide between rich and poor countries, because the only reason why people are going to associate with each other is because of capital. But pretty depend on the idea of religion and order, we particularly get from them that it's also going to be very orderful. There's going to be a lot of law because law is going to disregard this. We can also have to understand why do individuals follow the law. We think that one, the belief in the afterlife, the belief that there's a life after death, allows individuals to want to follow those laws because they align them with their own religious doctrines. But we think that on the comparative, it becomes worse on this side of the house, because if an individual does not believe in that law in itself, they have no reason to follow it, because it's not something which they don't have any greater consequence towards that. We particularly think that if an individual is not agreeing with their government, even if they not agree with what the system that is being purported, they will just not follow that law, because that law in itself becomes ridiculous. But when an individual is following laws that are supported by an undeniable higher power, as supported by an undeniable law that is being purported by a lord, that becomes much more difficult for individuals to want to go against what that law is trying to say. But then individuals become much more likely to follow these laws and follow these laws when they're being backed by religion. This is for example, in Saudi Arabia and Iran, where there's a large amount of religious law. That is where the rates of crime are the lowest. As compared to, for example, the USA, which has become an increasingly secular state, where more and more individuals are breaking the law because they don't particularly agree with what the law is actually telling them to do, because they don't have that level of religion backing them. I think for these reasons, we're proud to propose.
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech. We'll now call upon the member of opposition to come and give their extension here.
Okay, I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So before moving into our main substantive matter, we would first like to, as a house, actually give clarity to this motion as a whole, as although the info was divided, we still need to specify the motion to make it applicable and debate effectively, right? So what is atheism? Atheists are not morally dissidents. They are not moral dissidents. Atheists are not immoral. Just because government seems to think that they are, and they actually fail to back up any of their claims. Atheists are not immoral. Actually, to quite the contrary, they are simply moral individuals because they're actually more moral than religious people because they have personal values that are not off of the basis of wanting to reach heaven. So in that fact, we feel that religion is actually a transactional relationship because you only do something, well, you only do something good, for example, or something moral because you want to get to heaven, not because that thing is moral or good. Okay, now moving into our main rebuttal extension that the opening half failed to recognize. So what the Prime Minister of government said was that they believe that only pious religions can enact social justice. This is simply untrue because atheists are the ones who are able to actually engage with the human condition. And the human condition is to do with social justice. So in that regard, atheists actually trump religious people in terms of actually enacting social justice because they are not plagued by going against their religion in hopes of actually enacting in hopes of actually enacting social justice. What does this look like? It essentially looks like abortion rights in the US, right? Some people who are Christian and who have said that they have and who are devout Christians do not feel that they can support people who are pro-choice, right? So what is that? So what does that prove? It proves that religion actually impedes someone's ability to enact social justice because of the checks and balances that one has to fulfill to actually be a part of said religion, right? And now moving into our second rebut. They seem to think that atheism negates morality, but it does quite the contrary. Because as I said it before, when someone is atheist, they're able to follow their personal values and also societal values and checks and balances stated by the government. What is wrong and what is good, not something that is said by a divine being that can be misconstrued as seen in Islam countless times again. In Islam, they have to accept it.
Aren't people more likely to oppress each other because they are different than when they all buy into the same idea and believe in the same God?
No, and that's actually going against your whole motion because you want people to be religious. So that's what pieism is about, right? But when you have different religions under pieism as a term, that is when you get discrimination. That is when you get discrimination, for example, from Christians towards people who follow Islam, right? And for example, we have Hinduism and Islam and Christianity in India, and we'd like to draw out how people are prosecuted in India just because they follow a different religion. And also historically, government seems to think that no religion has ever actually caused wars. That is simply untrue, and they actually fail to back up their already baseless claims. Because we would like to touch on the Spanish Inquisition, how when trying to spread Christianity, they actually ended up killing up to 30,000 to 300,000 people in hopes of spreading Christianity. So in that regard, Christianity has started wars, and religion has started wars. For example, we have the Crusaders, where you have religions going against each other simply because what they believe is different, right? And that actually falls under the pious term because it wants people to follow a religion wants to follow a religion with unwavering doubt. And we would like to draw into how this is simply detrimental to the society that they want. Rejection, I will accept you later, because they're rejected. So what we have is that when people follow religion unwaveringly, this allows for radicalism to be perpetrated in their world. And what does that look like? It looks like the Shia and the Sunni section of Islam, right? So what it looks like is when someone unwaveringly just commits to something without actually valuing its morals and what it actually stands for, that is when society is detrimented. I will take your POI now.
I don't think any religion says it is right to us. I don't think any religion says it is to us to kill. But also on our side, we have multiple choices to make in a more comfortable religion. So if you're gay, you can be Hindu, you can be a Buddhist, and
Okay, I
all
will
that.
engage.
You don't have that. You have material money. It's important.
So with religion, yes, the doctrine does not say commit murder. It does not say kill people. But the people who have been bestowed upon the right to spread this religion allow for murdering and allow for violence to actually be perpetrated in said society, going against the whole argument of how atheists are more materialistic. In what world are atheists more materialistic when it is a human need to want to earn more, to want to progress in society? It is something that is within your mind, whether you are Christian, whether you are atheist, whether you are a part of the Islamic community. You have a need and you have a want to actually progress. This does not equate to greed, and therefore crushing your argument right there. And now we have the burden of proof, right? They weren't able to show how our world of actually just following atheism and not allowing people to, and not allowing the blind to lead the blind is actually far more of a detriment, right? Because in our world, we prefer if people are atheists, right? This does not perpetuate greed because they do not have the want of saying, oh, well, if I convert this gay person to someone who is straight, oh, then I will make it to heaven. That is precisely what we are against. And that is how religion actually goes against social justice movements. And then furthermore, we have the harms that exist in their world actually outweigh any harms that could be a result of our world, right? Because with pious religion, as stated in the info slide, it is unwavering, meaning that people do not have the judgment or the knowledge to actually judge whether the section of religion or section of Christianity or Islam is actually promoting moral values, right? And again, we draw back onto how there are on how there are different branches of religion, some that promote radicalism and some that don't. And in a world when someone can unwavering just become a part of a radicalist religion, that is a world that we do not support. And why we are so proud to oppose, right? And now we'd like to touch onto more of our arguments, right? So I'll just go on to closing. And that is why we are so proud to oppose, because in our world we promote the freedom to think. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech. Now call upon the government whip to come and sum up for government side. Here.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Can you confirm if you can hear me if I speak like this?
Clear.
All right. Thank you. I'll be accepting your eyes verbally since I won't be looking in the chat box and I'll be running an external timer. Please don't badger during my speech, otherwise I won't take you. So without further ado, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, in a hypothetical motion like this one, we think it's utterly important for teams to do two things. One, we don't expect teams to debate status quo and show us about the problems that exist with religion within status quo, because they needed to show us why those problems would most likely exist within this hypothetical world. But two, we think teams need to show exclusivity of their counterfactual or their world, right? This is to say that if they don't prove why their world is slightly different from what they're talking about, then they have no metric with which they can win this debate. So what does this hypothetical world look like, and why is side opposition out of this debate? Firstly, it's a world in which everyone subscribes to this pious religion, right? This is to say that everyone within society subscribes to a certain faith that allows them to buy into certain beliefs. The reason why this nuance was important is because when my partner gives you exclusive characterization about how societies are formed around identity. What this means is that within people who are guided by faith within that religion, those individuals are willing to trade off certain characteristics towards that certain good. We think this is the reason why even extremism exists within status quo. The importance of this is that one, we think when side opening government tells us that, you know what, religion becomes less inclusive and doesn't allow freedom of expression within its structures, we think this becomes functionally useless because people within those structures don't value that freedom and inclusivity anyways. Because we think if people are buying into a certain faith, we think they are devoted to that and they live by that code. They're willing to trade off the idea that they're gay, they're willing to trade off the idea that they're a woman and they cannot lead a family, right? We think because they are so devoted to that particular religion, they are less likely to even care about those other things. The reason why this is true is because this world doesn't look like status quo. These individuals grow up into this, they are socialized into it, and they're actively indoctrinated into thinking that way. So we don't think these individuals are going to value that anyways. But secondly, we think when they talk about international relations, this becomes something that's functionally useless, right? I'll take you later. Because one, we think within status quo or within their world of atheism, we think countries are still going to engage within conflicts because of economic beneficiation that they seek to get and even the political will that they want to get. We don't think that Saudi Arabia and Iran are just fighting based on religion. We think there's economic motivation for that. And we think that there's so many political conflicts that exist between those two countries. We think the scramble for resources between those two countries is still something that's going to exist within atheism. So we don't think international relations slightly become better. But I think it becomes worse on their side. Because what that means is that countries cannot relate on a cultural level that prevents them from actively attacking each other. This is to say, for example, the Arab Emirates, the reason why they're so closely tied to each other economically and politically, they're able to relate, is because they particularly buy into the actually allow them to have proper relations. So we think if you are going to break up that idea of religion as a form of common identity between those states, you're most likely to have more conflicts existing between them. Before I move on to why side closing government wins this debate, I'll take one.
Yes, Speaker, with the notion that everyone is essentially subscribing to religion, at the end of the day, wouldn't there still be some form of marginalization based on different religions existing, that status quo that you talk about?
No. This is the problem with your case, right? We think when individuals, if you are gay, if you are a woman, actively subscribing to a certain code of life, right? We think you are most likely devoted to it. We don't think within the religious structure, you are most likely to be oppressed within it because you believe in that structure and you think that structure holds the ultimate value. We think you are most likely going to be willing to trade off. But also, my partner clearly tells you that we think that within the multi-nature of religion, individuals are still free to opt into many different religions, which allows them to even have different sentiments within those particular religions. And we think this is something that you need to consider. So what do you get on side closing government that really wins in this debate? Firstly, we think the characterization that you get from my member tells you that one, societies organize themselves in terms of identity. We think the way in which communities are formed is on common interests and common characteristics within people. What is the problem with this without religion, right? We think one, individuals begin to vary on different sentiments. If they begin to vary on skin color and race and so on, right? So why is this something that becomes problematic? We think one, there becomes a dictatorship of the majority, right? So what this means is that individuals that don't actively have the same characteristics are individuals that are most likely to be ostracized. We think this is why you have marginalization in countries like the United States, where Black people are marginalized within that society because they've organized their culture based on race and that identity group itself. The reason why this doesn't happen in a world where everyone is pious is because individuals use religion as the ultimate form of community, right? Where everyone particularly believes within that institution. So what's most likely to happen is that you're most likely to have inclusion of all the identity groups within that particular religion. We think that if you are able to engage within Christianity, regardless of whether you're a Black person or a white person, we think that religion becomes more accommodative to everyone within society. But two, we think that when individuals are most likely going to shape policy and how policies are formed around that idea, we think those policies become inclusive for everyone, right? This is the reason why in countries like Saudi Arabia, you have low crime rates because people believe within that particular law system itself because of how they believe within the religion that exists within that particular country. And we think this is something that's particularly valuable within that particular community. But secondly, what do we think is actually valuable with this piece of characterization from the closing government, right? And why do we rank above opening? Firstly, we think that opening government fails to answer two questions. One is what happens when religion is becoming exclusive, right? What we told you in essence is that when individuals actively buy into that religion, they are more than willing to revel in the comfort of their differences. They are willing to trade them off in order to buy into that particular idea of religion because they are guided by faith to opt into it, right? But secondly, we think that individuals particularly become more inclusive of each other within said communities because we don't think they vary as much as atheists do. Because we think in a world with atheism, we don't think individuals have an incentive to be inclusive. We think individuals become selfish and want to ultimately get their own differences being accounted for, right? We think in that world where people just vary is a world where you don't have any form of societal cohesion and agreement. And that's the world that actually leads to individuals being ostracized because you think if you're the majority being white people, what you're most likely going to have is that policy making is going to be shaped around white people within that particular religion. We think when everyone buys into a certain code of life and a certain religion, individuals are most likely to be inclusive and are most likely to have more social cohesion, proud to gain first.
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech. We now call upon the opposition whip to come and sum up the entire debate. Yeah. Opposition whip.
Sorry, am I audible?
You're audible.
Okay. Let me stop my timer. Oh. Okay, so I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Firstly, I'm going to respond to what we've heard from the government bench. Then I'm going to move on to the summarization and prove to you how we win this debate. Right? So firstly, from the teams in government bench, they told us how this is an incentive to be involved in community, how people are going to share a shared identity and so on. Right? So firstly, what I'd like to clarify, like my first speaker already told you, right, is that Christ's religion does not say that everyone should adopt Christianity solely or Islamic religion, Hinduism, Judaism, right? But it exists in a world where it happens in the respective existing religions, right? So this is to say that this highest religiousness is going to exist in the Islamic religion. It's also going to exist in the Hinduism religion, in the Christianity religion, and all these other religions, right? But moving on, right? This shared identity that they talk about is not in the individual's best interest, right? This also happens in our world, though, because the world you share, because the world will now share the same ideology. But the reason why it's better on our side is because there are a number of religions in status quo, right? 5 and above, meaning that there's still some form of division, which means that the shared identity is also still going to be divided, right? Which isn't there in our world because every single religion is not going to exist, right? But secondly, they talk about how there's going to be a materialistic world, how you're going to be valued by how much wealth you have and how many materials you have, right? Even if that was the case, it is still better because in the chase of materials, you do not compromise crucial life expectations that you have. But secondly, you enjoy the fruits of your work, which is not the same within their world, right? They also talk about the idea of inclusivity and inclusion, right? if they do get it on their side of the house, it is going to be divided, meaning that it is going to be insufficient. But secondly,
Speaker. Hello.
sorry about that. So I'm going to continue in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the reason why this is going to be insufficient on their side of the house is because of the different religious ideologies, right? They have no incentive to set those things, to set those ideologies aside. In our world, though, no religion, meaning that these contrasting
Sorry, it
ideologies
just looked
are
like the
non-existent.
network
We
dropped.
do acknowledge that.
Speaker, we lost you at around 2 minutes 29 seconds of your speech.
Okay. Am I still audible though?
Yes, you're now audible.
Sure. Okay. So let me put where did you last hear me from?
You were talking about how the shared identity won't exist in their side of the world because of the differences in religion that already exist.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to continue in 3, 2, 1. Okay, they also talked about how our world is going to be materialistic. And then we tell you that even if it's going to be materialistic, it's still better than their side of the house, because in the chase of materials, right, you do not compromise crucial life expectations, but secondly, you enjoy the fruits of your work, right, which is not the same on their side, right. They also talked about the inclusion. We think that even if they get it, it's still divided, meaning that it's one, insufficient. But because of these different religious ideologies, they have no incentive to set those aside. In our world, though, no religion, meaning that those contrasting religious ideologies are non-existent. We do acknowledge the fact that there isn't only one contrasting ideology, but in our world we're better because it's non-existent, since it exacerbates social inequality and also causes things such as religious wars, right? But the closing government talks about the incentive to follow the law, right? On their side of that, they talk about how people want to get to the afterlife. This is why they follow the law, right? But we also have an incentive to follow the law on our side of the house because there's punishment, harsh punishment, and variations of methods of punishment that they have already witnessed on law offenders, right? The reason why they told you how the reason why people don't find it oppressive, because they talked about how people don't find it oppressive, right? I think that this is because of two reasons. Firstly, it is because it was imposed on you, and secondly, it was marketed. Exactly why we tell you that it is oppressive, because it wasn't your sole choice, right? They also talk about how there's laws in religion, right? The government does not say that killing someone is illegal because religions believe or say so, but it is because it preserves their populations and helps them fulfill their fundamental. Right. Now, onto how preferring our world is actually something which is justifiable and how it is something which is desirable. The reason why it's justifiable is because it does not impose its views on individuals. Secondly, it does not force individuals to participate in religious activities. It respects you as a person because they do not expect you to do things which you don't have the capacity or the resources to do, right? But onto why it is more desirable, why it is desirable, right? Is because something to be desirable, it needs to free you of the burdens that hold you down. Right? We'll show you how this impacts different groups in society. Right? For example, high-class individuals. Right? You show commitment and guarantee your position through unwavering fulfillment of rituals or following ethical code. Right? Which means that if you skip with a high-class individual with valid reasons, right? One, it is not considered as to why exactly you did not fulfill that ritual, you did not perform that ritual. And secondly, you're forced to prioritize religion over things which are directly tied to your very own safety, right? You will likely be ousted from that religion because that's the world that you're going to be living in, right? We then notice how this is unfair and how unrealistic it is. But for middle class individuals now, you're someone who isn't well off. There are good days and bad days, right? You have limitations that are more than a high class individuals, but they're less than that of a lower class individuals, right? You're not excused if you say, I could not afford this specific thing because I had to pay for my child's education. Meaning that in that world, there is no progress, right? Education is less valuable at the end of the day. Meaning that if that is preferred, after a few years would not be accessible, nor would they be affordable, because apparently you don't have a way to earn because you prioritize religion over everything else, right? Because your parents prioritize religion over your very own education, right? When you now try to survive, they tell you that don't steal, don't do what? They rather you starve to death because you're not supposed to live a certain life. Now, on lower class individuals, these people score badly. They cannot afford those requirements. They don't have the capacity. Even if they did have the capacity, they cannot trade that off for their own survival, right? Now, how is their world worse, right? Because one, people who don't or those who slack off are marginalized, right? When this is one of the major reasons why people are marginalized at the end of the day, the donations that they talk about are unlikely because those individuals are not worthy of helping because they do not perform these rituals or live a life following these ethical codes, right? But secondly, those who don't have a life and prioritize allocating resources and time to being pious are being forced to do so because they want what religion has to offer at the end of the day. The idea has been marketed well, and it is oppressive because one, unless what you say promotes religion or is politically correct, shut up, follow the ethical codes. You cannot express anger because it is wrong, and because we don't allow it. Your ability to do things better for you is then taken away at the end of the day. We think that at a moment in time where a religion or a world is going to oppress you, to tell you that you're not supposed to express yourself, to tell you that you're not supposed to choose this, you're supposed to live a certain life. At that point, you notice how even your own rights are being oppressed, and with that, you've never been more proud to oppose.
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech. That marks the end of this year's grand final. You may virtually crossroads and wait for the award ceremony. Panelists, may we join OG prep room so that we can start our deliberations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the debate.
Thank you, bro.